Hey everybody, welcome to our celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. How's everybody doing tonight? This is Mónica Palacio, candidate for DC Council at Large, running to win a seat this November. I'm so excited that you're joining us tonight. We have a fabulous kickoff night. It's September 15th, kicking off 30 days of celebrating, recognizing, enjoying our Latino heritage as a very diverse community. So it's wonderful that you're tuning in, spending the next 30 minutes with us. I have an amazing guest whom I'm about to introduce, but if you joined us just a minute ago, we were playing a little cumbia, and cumbia is one of the more universal tunes across the Latino diaspora. So it's fantastic to share with you a little bit about our culture. A little bit about me. I was born in Bogota, Colombia. I have Caribbean heritage on my father's side, Afro-Colombian Caribbean to be precise. And on my mother's side, her family was from the Andean region in Manizales. So I have a little bit of everything mixed in, and I came to the United States when I was just 3 years old. So now I'm going to turn it over to my lovely guest, Mr. Rolando Roebuck, to introduce himself, and then we'll get into our topics for the night.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say thanks not only on behalf of myself, but also the members of the Afro Latino community who are extremely pleased with the notion that you have been one of the first to recognize us as part of that Hispanic heritage celebration, since at times we tend to be excluded. So I am extremely pleased to be here with you, share a few thoughts, and see how we can begin that process of motivating people to become more aware of what you represent in terms of increasing the political representation in our city, since that I see that as very vital with respect to having members of the Latino community not just represented in the business sector, but also in politics, since that is the place where legislation is enacted to benefit all of the members of DC. So I'm pleased to be here with you tonight.
Thank you, Rolando. And you and I were neighbors back in the old days in Petworth. But you and I also share a long history of activism in the city, and I'm so proud of the work you've done. You also worked in district government for many years, and you are kind of like the record keeper. You know, you are someone who has been archiving our rich history in the DC area. You know, when people hear immigrants, they think, oh, they've arrived a year or two ago, maybe 3-4 years ago. But can you say a little bit about how long Latinos and Latin Americans, Central Americans have been coming to the DC area and who they were?
Well, in terms of calendar, we have to go way, way back. And I'm talking about in the 1940s, because we had Latinos coming to DC in association with many ambassadors from Central and South America. That's how this group began to manifest their presence in the district, primarily in the Adams Morgan area. So from the 40s, you had different waves of migration. The majority of the people in the 30s and the 40s were primarily from the Caribbean. Then in the 60s and the 70s, we began to see an increase of members from Central America due to the war in El Salvador and other conflicts that forced this migration into the city. In terms of our contributions to the district, we have excelled not only in the area of culinary traditions, but also business. Okay. And the contributions of our, let's call it, Latino forefathers still are being felt today, because we have, for example, Casilda Luna, who was a pioneer back in the 30s and the 40s, and she was very instrumental in the creation of various community organizations which provided services to the Latino community, such as El Fula, which was a center for seniors. She also participated in the creation of the Latin American Youth Center, the Hispanic Festival, Change Incorporated, etc. So we have had a long legacy of making contributions to the development of the city. Unfortunately, the historians have failed to reflect that history. So now we have a younger of generation of individuals such as Manuel Mendez with the Afro-Latino caucus, who are attempting to correct that historical vacuum and elevate those invisible leaders and give them their due in terms of their contributions, which have been neglected in the past. And we also need to understand that our contributions and presence should not just be recognized during Hispanic Heritage Month, it should be a continuum. And the school system also needs to become more aggressive in recognizing the Latino leaders who have made DC a better place.
Absolutely, Rolando. You put it beautifully. And when I think about Carlos Rosario and
Right.
Maria Gomez, Bibi Otero, right? So Pepe Lujan, so many giants that help build up our community, serve our community, and be almost the default political leaders of the community, because we haven't had any elected political leadership. But people like you and people like, Maria Gomez are the ones that get the phone calls, right? When the news happens in CNN or Telemundo or USA 9, they want to talk to somebody. Don't they call you?
Yes, yes, they do. And it is I think that as leaders we have failed in clearly documenting the history of these individuals in the past. And I'm hoping that the new generation of our leaders will be able to correct that record, because it's very, very important, especially for people that are coming into the district that have no sense of the historical legacy of many of these individuals, and just analyzing the Latino community from current issues. And the main issues that impact upon us is the whole issue of immigration, the whole issue of DACA, the whole issue of the pressures that we are under with ICE and other entities that are pressuring our community to the point that it has created a lot of instability. Whereas in the past, there was more or less an accommodation and an understanding by government not to engage in these repressive actions to destabilize our community. And it's also very, and I refer back to education, because our students who are in bilingual schools need to enrich themselves with the history of those that played a key role in establishing the community, not only to increase the self-esteem, but to feel proud of the legacy of leaders in the past.
That's right, Orlando. You reminded me of one of my first projects. I moved to the district in 1990. I've been here for 30 years and I've worked on many frontline projects with many young people. But one of the most important ones that left that changed my life and left a mark in the world, I believe, was the Barrios Unidos project, where we worked with young people, high school students, folks trying to get their GEDs, but who were kind of lost. They felt disconnected from their culture. They needed a community to feel part of, to give them a sense of belonging and self-worth and value, in a very scary city. DC was a little more challenging in the 90s, but I remember how much we all wanted to talk about our history, our ancestors, our culture, our language, our food, our music. It's a bond that is so strong across all Latino groups. And I've done some work around the country too, because once we get together and somebody plays a little music and empezamos a hablar en español y hablar de la abuelita, la chancla, el Vicks Vaporú, all of a sudden we have this energy that's released. That's the power of our culture and our connections to each other. And I think our early leaders in DC, like you mentioned, just they nurtured that. They protected that for us.
Yeah. And that's the reason why the Hispanic Heritage Festival played a key role in educating the larger community with respect to the various cultural nuances of our people. Because during those 2 days, we had an opportunity to display culture, display food, display challenges, displayed many aspects of our community, and at the same time, it provided a level of temporary pride of the members of the Latino community to see their flag, to see their participants from all of the Central and South America. But most importantly, it provided an opportunity for blacks, white, Asians, and other groups to view and feel this rainbow of culture.
Yes.
Unfortunately, members of the white community at times took a hard line and forced us to move the festival, because we first started in Calorama, we had it on Columbia Road, we had it in Mount Pleasant,
Kept
and
getting
each
pushed.
one of those zip codes, there was an element of, I would say, I would call it cultural genocide,
Hmm.
because they did not want to see this display of culture in their zip code, because it interrupted their peacefulness.
Right. It's a little bit like the Don't Mute DC movement, right?
Right.
People calling the police when they hear loud music or, go-go music or a little bit of Chuck Brown. I don't want to get into the gentrification conversation, but you're right. We have to have safe spaces to share our culture, to celebrate our culture. And, watching the Bolivian dancers, and watching the Puerto Ricans dance, for me, that's part of the connection that I've held on to as a Colombian woman who didn't grow up in Colombia, right? But now I have a little bit of everything that connects me to the entire Latin American experience. And that's so powerful. It's very powerful because there are not a lot of Colombians in DC, just a few of us.
Right. No, most of them are in New York, but the other responsibility that our parents need to exercise is the whole issue of educating their children with respect to their own respective cultures. And I'm noticing that there is a serious hesitation by some of our parents to teach about their culture.
Hmm.
And there is also like a element of shame to highlight the humility and the poor conditions in which many of these parents live. And I'm saying, I'm taking a different view, which is you have to teach them not only about their past, you have to teach them also language, culture, spirituality, understanding of the political dynamics that are affecting their respective nations in order to create in this young person an idea that he or she is part of a larger world. If you don't do that, you're going to have many Latinos like Mario Perez not speaking Spanish, not understanding the difference between Sonsonate and Chirilagua, and refusing to eat pupusas because he is accustomed of eating burgers. So the challenge for the parents, Latino parents, is very very serious.
Oh, it's very real because cultural domination, is part of the US, right? It's like everything the US sells, makes, does, is supposed to be superior to all the other countries surrounding it. And we don't buy into that. But Rolando, I want you to tell us a little bit about your particular Caribbean Latino heritage in case folks don't know. Oh, wait, we lost your audio.
Hmm.
Oh, no, you're back. You're back.
Okay. I was born in New York. I lived there for 4 years. Then I moved to Puerto Rico. My mom is was Puerto Rican. My father is from St. Croix, and that is the reason why my name is Roland Roebuck, not Rolando Rivera Quiñones del Rio. Okay, so in that rich environment, I was able to absorb a lot of cultural values, which helped me to navigate my presence not only here in DC, but as I traveled throughout the world. Okay, now here in Washington, DC is where I began to develop a very militant view of my Afro Latino-ness. Because in Puerto Rico, I was not aware that there were Afro Colombians or Afro Venezuelans, et cetera, et cetera. So Washington has provided me with an opportunity to connect with the members of the diaspora, not only in the Americas, but also in the African continent. And I've been here since 1974. I served in the Air Force because I was forced to join the Air Force. So I was there
Wait,
69 to 90
why were you forced to join?
because they had a draft
Ah,
back in 1969. Unfortunately, people from colonies cannot vote for the president of the United States, but he can force you to join the military. So I joined the military with a very anti-war attitude, but I had to behave in order to get my honorable discharge and leave that place. So I served in Okinawa, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam.
wow. So we owe you a great debt, Rolando. You have been fighting for US freedom for longer than I've been alive, maybe.
Yeah, but those freedoms at times are not given to the colonies.
Yes, that's
So so it's sort of a contradiction in terms of knowing that you were forced into the military to impose democratic principles in other regions, but you do not enjoy them in your own colony. But going back to DC, it is very critical for the members of the black and white community to understand that the Latino presence in the political arena is very critical because you cannot claim to have social harmony when one of the largest groups in the city does not have political representation in the council. And it's extremely, extremely important for this electorate to understand that they have an obligation and a moral, and I would say not only an obligation, but morally they should be contemplating increasing the ethnic representation of the council. And that's the role that you are now playing. And I'm hoping that this electorate can transcend the traditional black and white pachanga and expand their selection to include members of the Latino community, because we deserve to be there based on the legacy of our contributions to the development of the city.
Thank you, Rolando. You put it beautifully. We're way overdue, and the irony here is that I've talked to a lot of voters now. I launched my campaign in January. I mean, in February of this year, but the world shut down in March. So I've had to find really creative ways through Zoom and knocking on some doors and talking to people, from 10 feet away. But there's a lot of solidarity from the African American community in DC. When they find out that there's never been an immigrant voice elected to the council, they are shocked and they're outraged. The African American experience in DC, in the country, like the civil rights movement and everything that they have fought for, we've benefited from that. But now it's time for us to take up our own cause, right? And say it's not okay for Latinos to be profiled by police officers. It's not okay for ICE to hunt us down. It's not okay for people to assume that someone is undocumented because they have an accent or because they have brown skin. So we need greater protections for our immigrants in this community, and not just the Latinos, but obviously beyond. But Latinos are the largest segment of the immigrant community in DC. So that's why I decided to run this year. It broke my heart that we had never had anyone elected to the council that was Hispanic or Latin American heritage or Latino in any way, shape, or form. A few people had run, but a woman had never run. A Latina had never run. And I felt like after 30 years of service and devoting myself to helping our residents in DC, that I wanted to be the one to change history. And that's why I'm doing this. And as director at the Office of Human Rights for 6 years under 2 mayors, I have an incredible track record. And I have to talk about it because you know what? Newspapers aren't talking about it. Endorsements are flying around, to the white privileged candidates. We have to create our own spaces. We have to endorse each other. We have to amplify our own voices. And that's why I'm so happy that you joined me tonight, Rolando, because you spent your whole life, knocking down doors and saying, it's time for you to let us in.
Yeah. I cause a little fear upon folks sometimes. But the other issue is this: we're not talking about Latino representation in the council based on ethnic representation. We are talking about a professional candidate that is qualified to exercise that role. Meaning, I don't want this to be, oh, we voted for affirmative action because we want to be inclusive and we want to be nice, et cetera, et cetera. No, this is about recognizing a qualified candidate that merits participation in the political process, and at the same time merits the support of the larger electorate in order to, when I look at the council, I can feel comfortable in knowing that the council represents the demographics of our city. You
Thank
see?
you, Rolando. That's right. That's right. And it's funny, I was talking to someone today and I said, I've been working here for 30 years. Like, how qualified does a Latina need to be, right? I have a law degree. I've run my own small business. I've worked in the government. I've worked in the nonprofit sector. I've worked with incarcerated parents, returning citizens, kids involved in violence. I've worked in the government on housing discrimination. I've worked on hate crimes. I've worked with law enforcement. Like, I've done so much across the LGBTQ communities, faith minority groups, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, you name it. I've been there and I've worked on it. And I appreciate your confidence in me and knowing that I'm highly qualified for this role. But you got to have, sometimes your name. People need to know your name. So my name is Mónica Palacio. It's time for you to vote. It's time for you to vote for me. It's time for you to vote for Latina on the council in the District of Columbia. So any closing words, Rolando?
My closing words are to the electorate, and I hope that you find it in your heart to transcend the traditional black, white pachanga and look beyond those ethnic definition and expand your selection so you can feel comfortable with your vote, because your vote will then represent your values with respect to being an inclusive individual that appreciates diversity, and that diversity needs to be manifested by your vote.
Thank you, Rolando. And just in closing, I want to say that my platform is very clear. I'm on a mission to protect families and save lives in the district. We need to prevent evictions. We need to put families in sustainable, affordable housing. We need to put resources in schools where children are struggling, whether they're at-risk kids, special ed kids, ELL students. We need to support our students and their families. And last but not least, we need to deal with racial justice and law enforcement reform. We need a plan. We need to put it into place. You can't flip a switch and just change police officers from one day to the next. But a thoughtful, intentional plan will get us there. And I have the track record to be able to deliver on that promise. So I'm really pleased you joined us tonight. I'm so proud that we could highlight Rolando and his work in the DC community. And there's so many other fantastic leaders, which I didn't mention, Sonia Gutierrez, Pedro Avilés, Kike Avilés, amazing, amazing leaders who have devoted their lives to the district. So I want to give them a big shout out tonight too. We'll be doing more of these during Hispanic Heritage Month. But please check out my campaign, monicafordc.com. You can contact me at info@monicafordc.com. And I'm so thrilled that you tuned in tonight. If you can help out on the campaign, I need 3 things: donations, volunteers, and I need you to be ready to vote. Are you ready to vote, Rolando?
Yes, even if I have to vote twice, I will do so.
Vote often, right? That's how the old joke goes. All right, mi gente, we love you. Stay safe. We'll be tuning back in soon. Take good care. Good night.
All right. That was good.